Thank you, Lou. That was great. It's a pleasure to be working with Lou and the team of BlueNalu. It is one of those game-changing, innovative technologies that makes you feel good when you go home and you can sleep at night because you're actually contributing to the solution. So I want to, before we get to the panel, I have the opportunity to present a new educational initiative that BlueNalu is sponsoring. But before that, I want to tell you why it's important to me, because everything happens for a reason. And so I want to tell you why that's important to me. So I was born in January 1985. I'm not going to give you my whole life history. But that's important because every month since then, the planet has had above average global temperature. So that means everybody that was born January 1985 or later has never lived in a planet that was below average in terms of temperature. That's a major issue. So I went to school at UC San Diego, got my degree. That's the home of Scripps Institution of Oceanography. That's where I learned about carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So Charles Keeling, starting in 1958, started studying how much carbon dioxide there is in the atmosphere here at Mauna Loa, and found that it's increasing over time. Today it's about 409 parts per million. Earlier this year it was 415 parts per million, and it keeps going up. We all understand, because we see it every day in the articles and in the media, the issues that creates for us. Early in my career, for the last 10 years, I've been working in politics and working in industry to help develop solutions. So when you think about carbon dioxide, you're really thinking about the ocean, because the ocean is a huge carbon sink, and it can be either the source of many challenges for us, or it can be the source of many solutions. So we think about food, which is the topic of discussion today, and I can't wait to get into the panel to talk more about food and the impacts that we can all have. But it's also on energy, on water, medicine, and real estate. And thankfully, there are entrepreneurs, innovators, academics, nonprofits, certain media outlets that are really focused on highlighting those solutions like BlueNalu, for example, or solutions like floating offshore wind energy, other sources of renewable energy. People are learning how to desalinate water in more efficient, energy-efficient ways, really supporting not only the economic benefit of coastal communities, but also the ecosystems in which we thrive. And I think that we have a lot to learn from here in Hawaii, not only because we started studying the amount of carbon dioxide that's available in the atmosphere, but just the way of life, understanding where our food comes from, understanding that food represents about up to 30% of the greenhouse gas emissions that are emitted every year. So how can we make conscious, mindful decisions on the food that we eat? So I'm here to tell you that my wife and I, we've made a commitment in our own personal lives of reducing the amount of meat or animal-based protein that we consume in our own home. We're not ready to give it up because it's delicious, but we're definitely on that pathway. And I think that we can all make personal commitments to help the planet and help us thrive in the future. And that's really the genesis of Eat Blue. Eat Blue, which we're announcing here at this event for the first time publicly, is an educational campaign to educate people about where their food comes from, about seafood in particular. Seafood's a very complex ecosystem, very complex supply chain, and people really don't understand how that fish got to your plate. Most of the people around the world, I should say. So it's really the basic level of education. And we're focusing on 4 different buckets: ocean health, the human health aspects of sustainable seafood that Lou talked about in his presentation, the economic impact to coastal communities, and finally animal welfare too. So all these things are important. I think all of us have a role to play. So really Eat Blue is meant to educate consumers and ask of you, what is your commitment? What are you doing in your own personal life? So to help us continue that dialogue, again, I want to thank Lou for the presentation and reintroduce our panelists. Rachel from Sustainable Coastlines, and I originally was going to go and sit there, but I'm going to utilize this mic here, if that's okay, Denise. So I'm going to stay here at the podium. But we're pleased to have Rachel from Sustainable Coastlines, Colin Hazama from the Royal Hawaiian, from the culinary perspective, Anthony Alto from Green Island Films, talking about the media's perspective, and of course Lou, who's here to talk about some of the food innovations in a more deeper way. So I guess first question, this will go to the whole panel. Let's kick us off with an icebreaker. If you were a fish, and this is a curveball, this wasn't on the list of questions that was sent to them earlier. And I'll start with Lou because he's had a chance to think about it at least. We've talked about this internally at BlueNalu. If you were a fish, what would you be and why?
Great question. Oh, you on? Yeah, actually, we had the exercise amongst our staff just for fun recently. And actually, my wife and I were in Mexico, and we saw flying fish. So that's what I would like to be. So here I have a chance to actually enjoy the ocean, but also see the world at the same time. So that would be my answer. Flying fish, pretty cool. Who else wants to go?
Okay, I guess I'll go. For me, I'm also a spear fisherman, so I think being in the ocean, the one fish that I would probably like to be, and being born and raised in Hawaii, would probably be the elusive ulua, or the giant trevally. They're one of the strongest fish in the sea, and they're able to adapt to different temperature climates and zones, and they're found in different parts of the world, not just in Hawaii, across the globe, and they live up to, I think, over like 75 years or so. So I think that's what I would be.
Very nice. I don't have an answer quite that beautiful, but I think if I were to be a fish, I would be the very elusive Ono, because they are so elusive and so pretty with those stripes and shine.
I was going to say lobster because of its longevity until you mentioned your choice. Sounds like a good one to me. I think maybe a shark because I prefer to eat than be eaten.
You stole my answer, Anthony. All right. So as with most things, we always start with the fishermen in the room. They're the bedrock of coastal communities. So the first question goes to Colin. You're a spear fisherman recreationally, but you're also a culinary aficionado at the Royal Hawaiian. So tell us what you've learned as a fisherman, how you've applied that in your work as a chef.
Thanks, Greg. So I've been very fortunate to be kind of raised in Hawaii through my uncle being a fisherman as well as a spear fisherman, and also just being around the environment of food. And I've enjoyed food growing up. And being a chef, I've been very inspired to work and deal with closely, being very hands-on. I think being mentored by great chefs like Chef Alan Wong, Chef Roy Yamaguchi, then traveling over to the mainland, I got to see what it's about to be sourcing your products and ingredients and having that farm-to-table aspect. And talking about the sustainability in the ocean and the water, being able to see through the last 20 years of spearfishing and just being in the water, there's been a lot of different change in just the climates with global warming, as well as the certain species of fish certain ones aren't as abundant as they were before. So I think a lot has to do with being sustainable and making sure that you only harvest and select what you want and need. And that goes for with our hotel. We basically only serve and try to promote fish that's available during the times of year. Now with the long, deep snappers, we only are allowed to, I basically was reading a research that basically only 230,000 pounds were harvested last year, with 42% of what would be called overfished in Hawaii. So, with our auction, we're very lucky and fortunate that we have fish that we're able to select and get and try to promote in our menus, to sometimes maybe not have onaga or opakapaka, and maybe serve manchang or opa. And so that's just to kind of really educate more the public. People traveling and coming to Hawaii, they really want Hawaiian fish. So, the more predominant ahi and mahi-mahi or onaga, we try to use and showcase other fish that we have. And one other big thing that we really are promoting and pushing with a lot of our chefs here in Hawaii is, looking at the different aquaculture practices with Hawaiian kampachi, Kauai shrimp, kona abalone. They are farm raised, but they're also been done through the University of Hawaii and done really well to promote and use great ingredients and great product that is local and very, very actually healthy.
That's wonderful. I can't wait to eat some of your dishes. That sounds amazing. So Rachel, tell us about sustainable coastlines. And really, I'm interested in understanding your perspective about how do nonprofits like Sustainable Coastlines work with industry, work with hotel chains, work with companies like BlueNalu? How do we address the solution, or how do we address some of the challenges that Sustainable Coastlines that you're seeing in your work?
So, Sustainable Coastlines Hawaii, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We work across the Hawaiian Islands, and we're made up of 3 main programs. And our first program, and I think the most important, is our education program. And that goes to schools around Hawaii and educates the next generation about these issues of ocean pollution and helps them make smarter choices as consumers. We also host large-scale beach cleanups to teach the public, and many business owners, chefs, just the local community come out to these cleanups, and we get to share the story of Hawaii, not only being in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, but also in the middle of the Pacific Gyre, which is the heaps and heaps of, or floating soup of garbage that we have in our oceans. And then the third and most relevant to business owners is we have a waste diversion program where we work with companies and event planners to reduce and divert waste so that they're using less single-use plastics, recycling, but most importantly, composting all of the products and food that comes from their events. I think that the biggest thing is that we really strive to educate all of our volunteers, our partners, our donors and sponsors about this issue and empower them to be more innovative and come up with ways to reduce single-use plastics, design better products, change the status quo, and create better options for the consumers.
So you're on the beaches day to day. You're literally on the ground doing the work. So grade the community. How is the community doing? Whether it's here locally in Hawaii or plastics that land on the beach from who knows where. If you were to give it a grade, what would you say?
Grade. I think we're at a B right now.
Okay,
People are starting to wake up. People are becoming really aware. How many restaurants do you go to now and you see plastic straws? People are really starting to understand that we need to make these changes, that plastic is more or less a failure of design and we can make better products out of the things that have traditionally been plastic. The best thing about it is that people that come to our cleanups, they get to get inspired by the other community members that come out and give back, and they leave with the inspiration to do better. So we're getting close. We're going to be a B+ soon, I think.
That's your job. You got to make that a B+. Give us a time frame. You can't have a goal without a deadline.
I'm going to be a little strict and give us about 5 years.
All right, 5 years. You heard it here first. Rachel, thank you for being here. So I'm going to come to Lou next, but Anthony, I hope you're paying attention because you're the filmmaker. You're the one that make us all sound good. So I'm going to ask you to summarize kind of what you've heard. How do we communicate that to the public? How do you as a filmmaker start to synthesize all this complexity into sound bites that help drive change? But first, let me go to Lou. The whole reason why this event was planned was around BlueNalu, Eat Blue. Give us your experience. And you're a food guy. You're 35 years in the food innovation sector. I've learned a lot from you, and I appreciate that. But why now? Why BlueNalu doing what it's doing? And why would BlueNalu spend the time, the resources, to invest in this Eat Blue campaign, which at the end of the day is not directly related to the bottom line?
Yeah, great question. I think even the birth of BlueNalu was really about that recognition that as this is a unique opportunity for me as a person in the food industry, having been through all sorts of different employers, to actually give back, make a difference. So it's a tremendous, we hear about double bottom line, triple bottom line businesses. This is a chance, and all of us, I think all of us here today are all part of that kind of background where you could actually, make a living to the best degree possible, but also do something that's good for the planet. So BlueNalu was really something that I learned when I was here in Hawaii about how important this sustainability is to all of us. And it was very inspirational to me as I worked with food entrepreneurs and trying to help them become more driven to actually support their local economy, but also support sustainability in new ways. That again, I became my own customer, and so what Eat Blue is all about is really an opportunity for us to kind of hopefully lead the charge to some degree, but really act as a catalyst to get all of us to make a difference. We've been so motivated by our many investors who are all committed to sustainability, really making a difference. We're seeing that on a global basis. It's really phenomenal. I've never seen anything like this before. There's an awful lot of venture capital out there and other sources of funding that are really here to help make a difference. There's increasing global awareness. I'll let Anthony talk about it, about we need to do something. We're seeing Greta and all these wonderful spokespeople out there talking about act up, do something. Now is a time. We can't wait 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. We have to start now. So we're excited to hopefully learn from our own business model about how we can help all of you also think differently about what you can do as well. And again, we're excited to be back in Hawaii to actually launch this new initiative with you together.
That's great. Thanks, Lou. So, Anthony, you've heard a lot. You've talked to a lot of people, not just tonight, but in your work as a filmmaker. You tell a lot of stories. Tell our story. Help us tell it better. What challenges have you seen, and how do we do a better job of communicating the solution?
Thanks, Greg. In 3 minutes, right?
Or less.
So my TV series is about hope and inspiration. It's designed to give people an idea how we as a society can respond and how people as individuals can respond. Having said that, I guess my role here this evening is to be the voice of doom, because despite the fact what we're hearing is great stuff, but we are not yet, as a society or as individuals, responding to the level of crisis that we are dealing with. When I went to the underwriters, one of whom, Chris Benjamin's in the room, to raise funds for the series, I made the analogy to World War II. In World War II, it wasn't just soldiers and sailors who were fighting. Women became Rosie the Riveter, school kids started digging victory gardens, Kupuna went knocking door to door to sell war bonds. Why? Because everybody felt engaged. Everybody understood that our way of life was under attack, that it was an existential threat, and so everybody had to do their part. Well, the same is true today. Our way of life is under attack by ourselves. It is an existential threat, but we are not anywhere near doing our part. Being an optimist, I believe that we will increasingly, and it'll accelerate. And you know, I'm not up here to blow smoke up your coles, they would say here, Lou. But I believe that within the predictions we saw in your slide, that we would be at 40, down to 40%, if you like, quote unquote, real meat by 2040, I think is an underestimate. I think we're going to see an enormous societal shift in 5 years or less. I think in 5 years or less, every one of the fast burger joints, McDonald's, Burger King, etc., 90% of their burgers are going to be alternatives meats, because we have reached this tipping point and people are getting the message increasingly now, and we all have to take radical steps. And food happens to be one of the ones where, because we all have agency in this crisis, right? Food happens to be one area where it's relatively easy for us to take a big step, because 15%, roughly 15% of all greenhouse gas emissions come from industrial animal husbandry. So we can all collectively say, I'm not going to do that anymore, and we can reduce our carbon footprint. If every American were to go for a meatless Monday, just stop eating meat 1 day a week, it would be the equivalent of taking 35 million cars off the road in the United States every year. It's a huge impact. So we have to take agency. We cannot avoid this responsibility. The latest report by the Conference of Climate Mayors, the C40 mayors, says that Americans need to get into the habit of thinking about buying only 3 new articles of clothing a year to reduce our carbon footprint. The United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has given us 11 years to reduce our carbon footprint globally by 50%. That is a revolution in our economy. It is a complete transformation of our economy. The good news is we've done it once before. Again, in World War II, we went from 2% of our GDP on the military in 1940 to 32% in 1945. We went from building 2 Jeeps in 1940 to building more than 600,000 by 1945. We went from 500,000 people in uniform in 1940 to 11.5 million people in uniform by 1945. We went into the war still largely as a steam-driven nation, Most parts of the country weren't electrified. We came out of World War II leading the jet age, the atomic age, the nuclear age. We can do this, but we can only do it if essentially people who, like us, people who are well-to-do and privileged, start taking ownership of this crisis.
Anthony, thank you for being the sober voice of opportunity and call to action that we desperately need. So, I think Rachel, we're going to need your goal to accelerate based on what Anthony just said.
Tomorrow.
Thank you. Okay, so Anthony and Rachel are going to talk after this event. Lou and Colin are going to talk about BlueNalu in restaurants around the world after this event. But now is your opportunity to ask the panel questions. We want at least 3 questions from the audience, and I'm going to ask Denise to come back up and wrap us up before we can go do the drink and the eat part, because that's the fun part. That's why we're all here at the end of the day. So please. And sorry to interrupt. There are microphones that are being passed around as well.
Hi, my question is, what is the comparable nutritional value of the BlueNalu to the actual fish?
The same. It's nutritionally equivalent, so the FDA wants the consumers to know that it is in fact nutritionally equivalent, it's genetically equivalent, and the taste will also be equivalent. So yes, it is a challenge to accomplish that. The nutritional part is not the hard part, because it is coming from natural cells. It is the same. We're feeding fish cells something similar to what living fish are fed. And the critical part will be to maximize the sensory experience, which we want to lead with taste. And we actually think we have the opportunity to actually make a product even taste consistent, for sure, and possibly even better, more fatty, even more healthy down the road. So at a minimum, it's equivalent. The maximum, it could actually be improved.
Thank you.
The next hand I saw was about 2/3 the way back, gentleman in the blue shirt. I feel like I'm at a fish auction.
My question is, Anthony, you just said that you thought places like McDonald's and everybody else is going to move more towards this type of food. But, okay, those places are generally, people can't afford to eat at other places, and that's where they're going. How is this economically feasible for places like McDonald's and for our population that doesn't make the kind of money that people in this room probably do?
Thank you, Dean, for asking an easy question. So I actually think when I talk about a revolution in society, which is what we're talking about, we have to revolutionize to decarbonize our economy. That's what we're talking about, is a revolution. It's not going to come cheap. And so I think we are looking at a social and political revolution too. I think you could see it going on in the Democratic Party in the primary at the moment, where you have people like Elizabeth Warren who are offering a very radical agenda. We're at the tail end now, of 40 years of a move of wealth to the wealthiest people in society. And if you look at opinion polls, you see more and more people who are in favor of things that were quite actually unpopular a few years ago, things like a wealth tax. And I suspect American history has done this. It's gone through big swings throughout its history. And we're due for one. The last one was arguably the New Deal, where we swung to the left. And government got bigger and bigger and bigger until Reagan came along in 1980, and we swung the other way. I think we're going to swing back again. I think essentially people who are wealthy corporations are going to end up paying more taxes, and a lot of that money is going to be going to mitigate our carbon impacts and to adapt to the consequences of climate change. We're going to be taxed more. Maybe it's easier for me to say that with my Brit accent. We're all going to get taxed more.
Anybody else want to also try to take a stab at that question?
I can add to that. I think in the food industry, just like we saw in organic, products begin at a premium with any new technologies, the product initially is scarce. Apostle and Beyond started this category. You're now seeing Unilever, Nestle, Kraft, Maple Leaf, all entering plant-based. I was just talking to some people. There's the largest food show in the world. Attracts about almost 200,000 people, believe it or not. It was the Anuga show in Cologne. And they said it's a show held every 2 years. 2 years ago, there wasn't a single plant-based item talked about or seen. 2 years later, it was throughout. This is Cologne, which is a huge meat eating demographic there. Everybody's offering it. So the world has changed in 2 years on the supplier side. And once you see all these large companies come in, you'll see the prices drop dramatically. There's no reason we won't be at price parity or better than conventional products in the next couple of years.
One more question. Fifth row. Right here. That's whose hand I saw first.
Thank you so much for an extraordinary panel. Really fascinating. I wanted to ask a question about plastics, which I guess is to Rachel in the first instance, but also to BlueNalu. We're hearing now that every single one of us is ingesting the equivalent of a credit card of plastic a week through the seafood that we're eating. So I'd love you to talk more about that. And I just wanted to mention that 16% of fossil fuels go into plastics, and that fossil fuels are subsidized $5.4 trillion a year, according to the IMF. So the fact that big business is paying a lot less tax now than it used to, if we just got rid of the subsidies, we'd be making the transition a lot faster. So I would love to hear your views, particularly on the plastic, but also perhaps on the subsidies too. Thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you for those wonderful facts. It's true, but it's also important to know that it's not just through our seafood. Though a lot of our seafood does consume microplastics, and that biomagnifies up the food chain, and then as humans eating these predatory fish, we do get a lot of the toxins from those plastics. It's also in our water supply. Plastics come out of our clothes in the washer. They are ending up in our water supply, and we're drinking a lot of it as well. So that's something to be really concerned about, I think, personally. And just knowing the kind of products that you have. Plastic, at the end of the day, I think is a design failure. We have the technology to design something better. Plastic water bottles, for example, they don't get recycled into plastic water bottles again. Those caps are not recyclable. And the recycling system is broken for that matter. We don't really have a good recycling system in place. China's not accepting it anymore. We have the ability to design something better, to change the status quo and rethink the way that we approach products and convenience. And I think that that's the biggest first step.
So I think it also goes back to this idea of changing our lifestyles, right? So we didn't all use plastics 20 years ago the way we use them today. What would be so difficult about going back to the way we did it? So it does mean doing things that up until now have been thought of kind of, crunchy. You have to wear Birkenstocks to do this kind of thing. You go to a store with your bag to buy in bulk instead of buying something in plastic from Costco. But it does generate a laugh when you talk like that, because we've grown accustomed to thinking this way. But in fact, this is the kind of change that we have to be thinking about. We do all have to start to go back to practices that we gave up a couple of decades ago. It really shouldn't be that difficult. Plastic should end up being a really important, highly valued product that we use very sparingly in the healthcare system, essentially. Pretty much all other uses should go. The plastics, the petrochemical industry, Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong, but the petrochemical industry, one of the reasons they're feeling kind of sanguine at the moment about the fact that we're all planning to move to electric vehicles to stop burning gasoline, they're kind of sanguine about this because they're looking at projections for plastics that are going to compensate for a large amount of the business that they're going to lose when we stop burning gasoline in our cars. And if you look at their projections, I believe it's something like, if you look at the carbon budget, how much carbon we can put in the atmosphere before we reach the point where we breach 2 degrees Celsius of climate change, there's a budget, how much we can put up there. And at the moment, plastic's going to take up 15% of it. So plastic is the world's largest oil spill. It's horrible, and we shouldn't be looking at this here. Alohani Hotel, please, no more plastic bottles. I mean, we have to be rejecting them in our lives. I mean, these are the small decisions that all of us have to be taking every day now.
So let me end this talk on that point, on the small decisions that we can all take, and encourage everybody here. Think about in your own daily lives. What personal sacrifice can you make? If you really love this planet, and when you love something, it means you sacrifice something to do what's best for that thing. Think about what that is. Go to www.eat.blue, sign up for the newsletter, and tell us what it is. Tag us on social media. The best way to make yourself accountable is to tell others what your personal sacrifice will be. That's the vision of Eat Blue, and that's what we hope you'll join us in communicating to your networks. I want to thank our panel for being an excellent panel, for being here today. And I want to thank all of you for your participation and engagement. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Denise, who is our ambassador extraordinaire. Thank you, Denise.
I want to thank Greg. He was a great moderator. This is probably one of the most thought-provoking Eat, Think, Drinks we've had. And I want to, again, thank Lou and the panel for being here today, and also all of you for being here. We've come to the end of the thinking part, and we're onward to the eating and drinking part, which a lot of you have come for. But I need to thank, I want to first introduce our chefs, who are pretty amazing. You will move from this floor up to the 5th floor. And we have tonight David Lukela of the Lohi Lani Resort, Seamus Alwyn of La Vie Waikiki, Eric Otto of Hoku's at the Kahala Hotel and Resort, Gary Tamashiro of Herringbone Waikiki, and Rodney Uehara of Viaggio Honolulu. And last but not least, I need to thank our beverage sponsors, Anheuser-Busch, Fiji Water, and Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits. We're going to have to talk to Fiji Water about these bottles. I would also like to thank Pernod Ricard for the generous donation of $10,000 from Smithworks Vodka to the Hawaii Agricultural Foundation's Disaster Relief Fund for Hawaii farmers. Please be sure to enjoy a cocktail on us by mixologist Tevis Freitas from Eating House 1849, Waikiki by Roy Yamaguchi. We hope you stay connected and continue the conversation of what you learned this evening. Before I close and have everyone move from the room, I want to thank my staff, Allison Tong, Sarah Mao, and Celeste of Hawaii Agricultural Foundation, and the Hawaii Food and Wine Festival team, who just came off a crazy month of October, for actually helping out tonight. I mean, it's actually been pretty crazy for all of them, and I'm one of those slave driver people. I'm like, okay, we can do Think Drink just 1 week after Hawaii Food and Wine, so I want to thank them, and thank you all for being here. Enjoy.